invite your attention to Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12. We're zeroing in tonight on verse 5 and 6 of chapter 12. We're right in the middle of a discourse being given by Jesus, leveled especially and spoken especially to the Pharisees themselves. And he's giving three illustrations, and we dealt with the first one last week on Saturday night, and we're dealing with the second one tonight. Seems to be really significant, especially because it's spoken by Jesus himself, and he has great truth to tell us. And secondly, it seems to be important because a lot of us are like Pharisees. No amens on that. So we need to be spoken to. And I'll be the chief if Pharisee, no doubt. This all spills out of an invitation that's been given by Jesus. And of course, the invitation is chapter 11, verse 28. So this is not just isolated stories that he's giving to us. And in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, he ends this phenomenal chapter with this whole idea of, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden." And of course, the idea of labor is the idea of total exhaustion. So he's talking to a people who are absolutely wiped out, who have been so overrun with the legalism of their hour and so overwhelmed with the ceremonies and the details, and the religion has become a ball and chain around their ankle. Instead of a spring in their walk, instead of energy in their system, it's become a drag, an obligation, a duty, something they have to do. And it's become so devastating in their lives that they've become absolutely exhausted. And the heavy laden, of course, is the idea of freight that comes down upon a ship. And they've just been loaded down with this freight of religion. Religion has beat them to death and worn them out. And Jesus is turning to them saying, "Come to me, all you who are in that condition. Come to me. Come to me. I will give you rest." And I don't know, there's something about rest that just kind of connects with all of us because we all feel like, whoo, I need that. And it's interesting, I kind of went back into chapters 8 and 9, and I haven't done enough research on it yet. But my guess is that you could go through all the illustrations that that Matthew gives in chapters 8 and 9, which are miracle illustrations. He's taking Jesus and walking him through the Galilean ministry, and he's picking these miracles as sample miracles. And it's interesting that many of them, again, I haven't researched them all, but they become acted out parables of the rest thing. For instance, there's one in Matthew chapter 8, verse 23 I was so intrigued with, because they're in a ship. Jesus has been ministering all day. They've gotten into the ship. They're going across the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus rests. He's asleep in the boat. Storm comes up. I'm talking 8-foot waves, I'm talking filling the boat. I'm talking, whoa, we're going to die. I'm talking this thing is rocking and rolling. I'm talking this is terrible. I'm talking the experienced fishermen like Peter are scared to death. And that really took something to get done. And Jesus is asleep in the storm. See, that's an acted out parable of this, what he's talking about. Come to me. See, you're in the storm. Would you deny that? You're in the storm. Would you say that's not true? You're in the storm. I'm talking about the storm of all that's going on in our society, the storm and pressure of your own life, the very essence of the storm that's going on in your own system. A storm within, a storm without. We're talking storm. What could give me? Is the pressure going to be gone? Is he going to remove? Is he going to solve the problems? Is he going to eliminate everything that bothers me? Obviously not. Could you sleep in the storm? That's the rest. That's the rest. And he indicates that as he closes out this chapter about the yoke thing. I want you to link with me. And we studied the idea of easy, and we studied the idea of light, which is all the concept of he's not going to eliminate the problems. He's going to somehow energize you within the problems so the problems aren't that heavy anymore. See, when you're by yourself, oh, this weights me down. When he now connects with you and you're yoked with him, the additional energy, resource, the essence of his person brings you rest. Because the problem is no longer heavy. It's a phenomenal deal. And now he moves us to this chapter 12. He's contrasting the Pharisaical idea of rest over against Jesus' idea of rest. And that's what this whole section is about. The old covenant idea of rest was take a day off. Take a day off. Oh, vacation, finally. See, that's the rest. Oh, but I'll have to go back to it Monday. Oh, it'll be tough Monday. And I'll grind it out another 6 days and take a day off. See, that's the idea of the old covenant rest. Why? Because it's a self-sourced rest. It's a self-sourced activity. God's over there, I'm over here, I've got to pull all this off. So religion became an activity that I did, and then finally, it was the Sunday, it was the Sabbath day, which was the rest idea. So the whole concept was, it was the idea of take a day off. Jesus says, what if it isn't a day off? What if you don't need a day off? What if you could take all the days off? What if you could just quit? What if you could just relax? What if you could just fall into my arms? What if you could link with me and I could carry you? Oh. Rest. Now he gives us these two illustrations of this contrast in chapter 12, and it goes from verse 1 down through verse 14. The two illustrations are from verse 1 down through verse 8, which is the grain picking thing that the disciples are doing on the Sabbath day. The second illustration, of course, is the idea of a man with a withered hand being healed on the Sabbath day, which we haven't even gotten into. So we're dealing specifically with verse 1 down through verse 8. We've divided it into three sections. The three sections are, number 1, the situation, which is verse 1 and 2. Number 2, the sample or example, which is verse 3 down through verse 7. And then the sum or summary or wrap-up or basic principle of the whole thing in verse 8. Now, in the sample, which is where we are, we're trying to deal with the second sample, second illustration that he gives. The three illustrations that he gives are, first of all, the showbread, which is verse 3 and 4. Second of all, which we're dealing with tonight, the Sabbath workers, which is verse 5 and 6. And thirdly, the superior mercy, which is verse 7. Let's go back to the verse 1 and 2, which is the situation, just to remind you about what's going on. It's the Sabbath day, and disciples are walking through the grain fields. You understand they're wandering out in the cornfields. They actually are walking the path, going from one spot to another. And of course, as they did, they utilized every single inch of space that they could possibly utilize for crops, because space was valuable. So as they utilized the space, crops were growing everywhere. So they're going down the road, and there's this grain that's everywhere coming at them. So they are allowed by Jewish law, because they're hungry, to reach out and pick the grain and eat. They're allowed to do that. They're not stealing in doing that. Now, if they took a sickle and went into the field and cut and began to harvest, that would be stealing. So they're not breaking the Sabbath day law, or not breaking the law of God in terms of stealing. They're just breaking the law of God because they're doing that on the Sabbath day. Now, technically, they've broke the Sabbath day law 4 times. Number 1, they are reaping, picking the grain. That's reaping. You can't do that on the Sabbath day. Number 2, they are rubbing it between their hands. That's threshing. You can't do that on the Sabbath day. Number 3, they're blowing the chaff away. That's winnowing. You can't do that on the Sabbath day. Number 4, they're eating. And if you know disciples, they always eat too much. So they probably overate what they are allowed to eat on the Sabbath day. So they broke the Sabbath day law 4 times, and they can be stoned to death all 4 times. So we're going to stone you to death 4 times over the Sabbath day law. And in verse 2, you'll note, the Pharisees came to Jesus and said, "Look, get our perspective, Jesus. Look through our eyes. Come on. I want you to concentrate on this, Jesus. Do you see what we see? Look, Jesus. Your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath day." Now, Jesus turns to them and basically says, I don't see what you see at all. Here's what I see. And he gives this first story. Oh, it's beautiful. Have you not read, this is verse 3, have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priest. David was running from King Saul. David is king at this time, only he's not taken over yet. King Saul is still in authority, trying to kill him. And he's running with these young men that he's got with him. And they've been running for 3 days. They're about to starve to death. They've been hiding. They finally come to this place called Nob, where the tabernacle is. And oh, the tabernacle. They come to the high priest, David does, and says, you got anything to eat? He says, absolutely not. The only thing I have is the showbread. Now, the showbread was 12 loaves of bread that were baked on this break for the Sabbath day, put on the sacred altar, and stayed there all week. Then when the Sabbath day came, the fresh bread was put there, and the old bread was taken, and the priest was given the old bread. Oh, it's good to be a priest. You get the homemade bread. So he got the 12 loaves, and he alone could eat it according to the law of God. Now, David comes in and says, we're hungry, man. We're starving. My men are starving to death. You got any food? No. All I've got is this 12 loaves that we just took off the altar. David took it. He's not a priest. I know. He took it, fed it to his men. Oh, we're going to have fire coming down from above. No. God didn't care. He didn't care. It was his law. No. But see, God is not focused on the law. He's focused on the human need. And the human need takes precedence over the law. That's his whole point. He's really strong on that. That God is not wrapped up in the law. God is wrapped up in human beings. For God so loved the law that he gave his only, no, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. The big deal in God's mind is you, not the law. Come on, you should understand this. We made a law in our house. Thou shalt not touch a hot stove. Why did we make that rule? We didn't have it until we had kids. Why did we make the law? Well, because we love laws. No, we don't give a rip about the law. What do we give the rip about? My kid. And when my boy or my girl touches the hot stove, I'm all upset. Why? Because that law was broken. No, because my child is hurt. See, God is not into law, he's into you. Well, why does he have laws? Because of what's best for you. And the whole deal is about you, not the law. So Jesus says, Pharisees, you've got it backwards. See, you're all wrapped up in the law. The big deal for you is don't touch the hot stove. Jesus says, I'm into people, not your law. Now, he gives this second illustration. Look at this thing. Verse 5. Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath day the priests in their temple profane, desecrate the Sabbath and are blameless? Yet I say to you that in this place there is one greater than the temple. The Sabbath workers. Now, this is going to be interesting. See if we can walk through this. There's a contrast set up. Not in the passage, but there is a contrast. And there are two approaches to make to this passage. Two approaches. And obviously, I believe one of them is right, one of them is wrong. And I want to walk you through the two approaches because that determines how you interpret the entirety of the passage. We believe in the church that Jesus is God. Jesus is God. He's the second member of the Trinity. We believe in a triune Godhead. Three distinct persons in the Godhead. And Jesus is the second member, if you please. First member, second member, third member. Holy Spirit, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, triune God. Three distinct persons making it's so united together that they are one. If you come to us and say you believe in three gods, we'll laugh you out of town, because that's not true. We don't believe in three gods. We believe in one God, but the one God is three, the three are one. So explain that. Nobody ever has, so let's not mess with it. So here's the three who are one and the one who are three. Jesus is the second member. Jesus, the second member of the Trinity, leaped off of his throne and became man. We understand he's God. We understand he's always God. We understand he's always been God. We understand he always will be God. We understand there's never been a time when he wasn't and isn't God. We understand when he was a babe in manger, he was God. We understand when he's walking on water, he's God. We understand when he's dying on a cross, he's God. Because if he isn't God when he dies on the cross, then it's the death of another nice guy, which doesn't mean a whole lot to me because lots of nice guys have died. And what is really significant about the death of Jesus on the cross is the fact that, oh, God is dying for me. That's significant. See, if you take that away from me, I don't have anything. So I have to have that. And that is so biblical and so absolutely fundamental to all redemption, that Jesus is God, and when he dies, it's Jesus who is God, who is dying, that redeems us. Wow, that's significant. But Jesus who's God, I can understand, but he becomes man. That complicates it. Because how can God become man? Well, you only got one shot in any kind of reasonableness in the mind. And it's a possibility. In fact, it's a bigger than a possibility. It's bigger than we know. I know that. And any explanation you give of it isn't going to be adequate. I know that. Because we're talking about things that are so huge and so dynamic, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't struggle to understand what's going on. So Jesus, who's God, has become man. Whoa, how could that be? I understand him as God. I mean, he's all-powerful. He knows everything. He's omnipresent. He's everywhere at one time. I understand that. But now he's become man. How could he do that and be a man? Obviously, he had to give up everything that made him different from you in order to be a man. God has lots of things that are different from you. I know. Again, he's everywhere at one time. You're not. I know. He's all powerful. I know. But you aren't. I know. He's all knowing. You're not. Although you may think you are, but you're not. I know. So how could Jesus become man? How could God become man? Well, you only got one possibility, and that is he took everything that made him different from you, and he set it aside and said, that's all mine because I'm God, but hey, I'm going to limit myself to be like you. Then you have this overwhelming question about, well, if God did that and became a man, and he limited himself to the resource I have, good night. How did Jesus do all the stuff he did? I mean, like walk on the water stuff. I mean, like raise the dead kind of thing. I'm talking about how did he do all that stuff? Obviously, the Gospels are telling us because all four Gospels start their Gospels in the first or second or third chapters. They start their Gospels with this idea, this story, this event that Jesus came to John the Baptist and said, baptize me. And the Father, through the Spirit, came and filled the man called Jesus. So obviously, the Gospel writers are trying to tell us that everything that happens in the Gospels can only be explained in terms of Jesus has become a man, but he's God, I know. But he set aside what he had as God, and as everything that makes him different from you, he set it aside, and he's become a man, and now he's been filled with God. So that he's not doing what he's doing because he's God. Well, he is God, but that's not how he's doing what he's doing. He's doing what he's doing because he's filled with God. And there's a difference. There's going to be a test after the service. Wow, that makes so much sense to me. Does that make any sense to you? So here's a man like I am, filled with God, not living out of his own stupidity, but living out of the wisdom of God. Here's a man like I am. Whoa, he's not living out of his puny abilities. He's living in the resource of God. Wow. So all the miracles you see that are taking place that Jesus does is not because he's God. It's because he's a man filled with God. The victory Jesus has is not because he's God. It's because he's a man filled with God. The reason he's loving is not, when you hit him, is not because he's God. It's because he's a man filled with God. The wisdom he has is not because he's God, although he is, but it's because he's a man filled with God. Now, when you come to this passage and you come down to verses like verse 6, Jesus says, I say to you that in this place there is one greater than the temple. Now, in my translation, the word one is capitalized. Is that the way it is in your translation? It's capitalized. Which means that the translators are indicating that the word one is referring to divinity. So they are, and you read the commentaries, this is what many of them, most of them, all of them, I don't know, some of them, whoever, this is what they will say. I say to you that Jesus is turning to the Pharisees and saying, listen, I say to you that in this place, right now, look me in the eye, this place right now, there is one greater than the temple. I am God and I am greater than the temple. And that he's referring to his godness. Now, I want to propose to you that violates the fundamental of what Matthew's trying to tell us. That Jesus is saying, I am not greater than the temple because I'm God. I'm greater than the temple because I'm a man filled with God. Well, how would that make you greater than the temple? Oh, come on. What's the temple? Cement block. What's the temple? Stone. What's the temple? Nice curtain. What's the temple? Furniture. Now in the new covenant, woo! I'm the temple. And God has come to live in me, and I'm a greater temple than the cement block. That's the contrast. So over here is Jesus saying, one greater than the temple is here because he's God? Or is he saying, one greater than the temple is here because I'm a man filled with God? That's the contrast. Now, let's take that idea. Are you with me? Let's take that idea and walk it into the context of this passage. Look at this. Verse 5. As you have read in the law that on the Sabbath the priest in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless. Now, the Pharisees are all bent out of shape because the disciples have done this stuff on the Sabbath day and they've broken the Sabbath day law. Jesus said, let me tell you about the priest. They work like dogs on the Sabbath day, and it's okay. For instance, the Pharisees, one of their rules was you could not light a fire on the Sabbath day. You couldn't put a fire out on the Sabbath day. Priests do. And it's okay for priests to do that. Why? Because they're doing it for God. They're serving God. They're doing it for God. And it's okay if you're doing it for God. The priests slaughter animals on the Sabbath day. It's okay. That breaks the Sabbath day law. I know, because you can't kill animals on the Sabbath day. I know. But the priest could. I know. And it's okay? Yeah. Why? Because they're doing it for God, in service to God. The priests take the carcass of the dead animal, lift it, and put it on the sacrifice altar. Oh, they lifted a weight. You were only allowed to lift a weight equal to a dried fig. And they lifted this heavy carcass. Well, it was okay. I know. Well, how could they get by with that? Oh, they're serving God. They did it for God. They're in the temple doing this for God. It's okay. In fact, the priest offered twice, get this, twice the sacrifices on the Sabbath day that they offered all during the week. In other words, they offered an amount of sacrifices on this day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Oh, but on the Sabbath day, they offered double sacrifices of any day of the week, which means they worked twice as hard on Saturday, on the Sabbath day, than they did on all the other days of the week. That's okay. No, yes, it is. It is. Why? Because they're doing it in the temple and serving God. It's okay. Now, I know you are all just young people and you don't have any memories like this. But see, I got memories of this stuff that you can't do on Sunday. We wouldn't take a newspaper on Sunday. Why? Wouldn't have a paper boy deliver on Sunday? Absolutely not. Why? Making him work on Sunday? No, not going to do that. We wouldn't go out and eat on Sunday. Why? We wouldn't make the restaurant stay open, and those people, they should be in church. We're making them stay there and work. So we wouldn't eat out on Sunday. Because that'd make them work on Sunday. We're not going to do that. We wouldn't buy gas on Sunday. We'd fill our tank up on Saturday. We encourage people. We knew that there were things like nurses and doctors and that sort of thing that had to work on Sunday, but we encouraged and looked down on people who would work on Sunday. We did. We did. Do you know? I've worked every Sunday for the last 57 years. And nobody ever has criticized me. Why? Because I do it in the temple. In fact, I don't work all week. I just do a little work on Sunday. And I'm so used to not working, and then when I have to work on Sunday, I have what I call on Monday morning a hangover. Oh, it's awful. I feel terrible. I feel like a truck has run over me. I feel like I want to crawl under the porch and die. I just have this awful, I just feel like And I vowed about 40 years ago I would never make an important decision on Monday. Why? Because I feel too bad. Because I work so hard on Sunday. And nobody ever came up to me and said, Manley, you are not spiritually right because you work on Sunday. Why? Because I work in the temple. See, that's what he's saying. I work in the temple, and it's okay. You know what Jesus says? You know what he's getting at? He says, you set that up in the old covenant. That's fine. Why? The priest could work. Why? He's serving God in the temple. Now Jesus is saying, I want you to come into the new covenant. I'm a spirit-filled man, Jesus says, in the new covenant. Do you understand what that means, he says? I am the temple. The temple is no longer a building in which you do things. The Spirit of God. See, God lived in the building that we built. He lived in the Holy of Holies in the ark. But all of that is gone now, Jesus is saying. And what we're setting up here is, I am going to be the temple of God. Why? Because God now lives in my flesh. And if you say, well, if God lives in your flesh, where does he live in your flesh? Exactly. Is he down in your toe? Is he up in your hand? Does he live in your blood pumper? Is he in your brain? I don't know. I don't even know where I live in here, but wherever I am, he is. So he has joined me in my life. And I am the living, moving, you got to get this concept, I'm the living, moving, functioning, operating temple of God. Well, now, am I the temple of God just on one day? No. I'm the temple of God on every day. Well, do I just do certain services to God and certain services to the world? No. All the services, all the service I render, everything that's going on in my life is for his glory. Are you getting this? Which means that one greater than the physical cement blocks of a building is here. I am here. I am the temple. God has filled me. And every day is the Sabbath day. And everything I do is service to God. Therefore, everything, nothing profanes his law. Pardon me while I have a fit. Yes! Isn't that good news? See, this is not that new. You understand Martin Luther in the 95 Theses, or what's it, 99? 95 Theses that they nailed to the door of the church, said this. It was the beginning of the Protestant movement, and that was the sacredness of every man's vocation. What the priest does is sacred. Yeah, it is sacred. But wait, what you do is sacred too. Well, who are you? Well, I'm an electrician. That's sacred, son. Because every man's vocation is sacred. So every man's vocation is sacred. See, there aren't sacred activities and non-sacred activities. Well, it's sacred to pray. It's not sacred to wash the dishes. That's not true. That's why you ought to wash the dishes. Notice I said you. You want... Tithing is sacred. That's true. Cleaning out your garage is sacred. That's true. That if you are indwelt by God, everything is for his glory. Let me ask you a question. Why do you work? Brother, why do I work? That's a stupid question, I know. Why do you work? Mainly, there's only one reason I work. It's money. I work for money. That's sick. That's sick. You work for money? You think I'd get out of that stupid job if I did? I hate that job. You think I'd get up at that? No. You think I don't like my boss? And all the pressure and all the I wouldn't spend. I can hardly wait to retire. I don't want to. No. That's the only reason I work is money. That's awful. Do you realize how anti-Bible that is? Well, why would I work? God has planted you right in the middle of your workforce. Think of this. And you are literally the temple of God, and through you is this flowing of the Spirit of God that's literally going to minister to everybody around you. And you're a full-time, down-to-it priest, minister, pastor to your entire workforce. And you get to see people I will never, ever get to see. And you get up in the morning saying, woo, going to the mission field. And God is so good, he pays you besides. Isn't that neat? Because you are the temple. The temple. Are you in? Are you indwelt? Well, what about the stuff that I do that God doesn't like? What? Why would you do that? Because everything you do is for his glory. But God has these rules. I know. And when I break them, he gets upset. I know. And when I disobey, he doesn't like it. I know. Why? Because I broke his rules and he's all into rules. No, he's not. It isn't about the rule. It's about you. And the reason God says, I have a rule, don't touch the hot stove, isn't because he's into not touching hot stoves. It's because he cares about you. Oh, Jesus. This really gets serious, God, because if you live in my hand, then you're involved in everything my hand does. And what on earth am I trying to drag you into? If one greater than the temple dwells here, and I am the temple, because I have become your body, and you have filled me. My activities are bringing reflection on your person. And I sincerely want to do everything I do to your glory. Oh, Jesus, could I become a platform, a piece of flesh, a body, a person, a human being that is consistently glorifying and demonstrating you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every day being a Sabbath day, resting in you, leaning on you, letting you source me, flowing through me, accomplishing the divine will, manifesting yourself, making yourself known to my world. Jesus, bring my emotions under control. Oh God, bring my nervous structure under your domination. Jesus, bring my appetites under the control of the Spirit of God that dwells within me. God, get a hold of my mind and let my mind come under the control of the wisdom and thought process of God. Jesus, get a hold of my temper, Lord, and let my temper only be fighting for that which glorifies you. In the name of Jesus, reach out and grab a hold of my body drives. Let them all become the dwelling place of God until from eating to my sexual experiences down to the very essence of the way I function in my life, they all become dominated by the one driving passion that you would be manifested. And God, you're not mad at me tonight because I touched a hot stove. Your heart is broken because all that you made me to be, I have violated. And you love me so much you can't stand it. And you're calling me tonight back to yourself. And would you say to me tonight, present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Heads are bowed. Got anything going on in your body, your temple, that doesn't glorify Him? Indwelt by Him, are you? And are you letting all of the members of your body magnify His name? Is this a one-day-a-week thing for you? Or are you the temple of the Holy Spirit? Controlled, moved, glorifying, manifesting the very essence of His life. Altars open, moments of seeking. Oh, dear Jesus, I'm seeking you tonight. I am seeking you tonight.